A classic example of the success self-directed teams can accomplish is the Saturn division of General Motors, discussed in Bowman and Deal. Saturn was able to reach high level of quality, customer satisfaction, and consumer loyalty beyond much of the U.S. automotive industry. They were able to do this by displaying what can occur when employees are placed in an appropriate structure of roles and relationships. Particularly, Saturn teams were working on refining the structure of teamwork, and they did this by giving each employee and individual certain responsibilities and accountability, much like what we have just previously discussed.
Management styles focuses basically on how individuals deviate in their personality and style. There are three different types of management styles. They are autocratic, democratic, and laissez-faire. Firstly, autocratic, it's productive but joyless. Basically, there's an authoritarian manager, and they're the ones that make all the decisions, and they keep all the information and decision-making among only the senior management. It's a form of downward communication, where all the communication just goes basically from the leader to the subordinates and not the other way around. It can lead to a decrease in motivation from employees because it's only the leader who's the one making all the decisions about, for example, who to hire, who to fire, who to promote, what ideas to take, etc. An advantage to this type of autocratic management style is that the business direction will remain constant and decisions will be similar because there will always be one person making them. It makes the organization seem very confident and well managed, whereas the only disadvantage is that the subordinates may become dependent on their leaders and supervision may be needed for everything. So the subordinates will become very less confident in making their own decisions and will always depend on their leaders to help them or to do it for them. An example of this type of management style is Al-Qaeda. Al-Qaeda is a form of autocratic because there's basically one leader who makes most of the decisions, and there are basically two types of leaders. There's directive and permissive. Directive applies to Al-Qaeda because it's basically all the decisions are made independently and unilaterally by the leader, but they are closely done with their subordinates, whereas the permissive autocratic leader will make decisions unilaterally, but it would give the subordinates leeway in carrying out their own work as well. The next form of management style is democratic. The democratic style is both productive and can increase positive group climate. This is where the managers allow the employees to take part in the decision making as well, so that there is a majority consensus and so that everyone agrees with what's going on. Democratic is basically it's good communication between both the subordinates and the leaders. Communication goes both ways, and this is very good for integrated communication because it leads to job satisfaction, higher morale, and better quality work within the organization. The third style I'm going to talk about is laissez-faire. Laissez-faire is more of a laid-back style that leads to a lot of aimlessness and confusion because the leader's role is not essential. Basically, the staff can manage their own area of business and not really have to answer to anyone, or if they did, the leader's not being a strong leader and he doesn't get involved with everything else. It's basically a form of horizontal communication because there's equal communication in both directions. There's not more in each side. The importance of having a leadership style is basically each company that has one, it gives them a choice for more powerful impact on their groups and higher productivity and morale within the organization. Under management styles, there are also two different types of interpersonal styles. There's consideration and there's initiating structure. Consideration is basically how much the manager shows concern for and sensitivity to the people in the organization. Having a higher consideration will lead to lower turnover and fewer complaints, basically just a better overall morale. Initiating structure is basically the degree to which a manager actively structures subordinates' activity and keeps it organized. Next I'm going to talk about different types of personality tests that a lot of organizations use to get to know a lot about their employees and how to work with them and how to give them roles and projects. The first one is the Myers-Briggs Type Indicator. It's a popular tool for examining management styles. This approach suggests that each style has its strengths and weaknesses and that none is better than the rest. It was built by Principles of Psychology by Carl Jung, a psychologist. The test is divided into 4 different types of dimensions. Each 4 dimensions can be divided into 16 categories, which are basically 16 ways that people can be identified. The first dimension is extroversion versus introversion. Basically, extroversion is the external world of behavior and action. It's people who draw energy from actually acting things out. So they would begin by acting, then they would reflect on their action, and then they would act again. Their flow is directed towards people and objects, as opposed to introversion, where their flow is directed towards concepts and ideas, because it's all internal for them, it's all about reflecting. They're less energized, that's why they reflect first, then they act, then they reflect again in order to build more energy so that they can act again. So extroversion is more of a concentration on acting, whereas introversion is more about reflection. The next one is sensing versus intuition. Sensing is where one is more likely to trust information that is present and tangible. It's information that can be understood by their five senses, and basically it's data, it's concrete. Whereas intuition is basically when one trusts information that's more abstract and theoretical. The next dimension is perceiving versus judging. And basically it's made up of, judgment is made up of thinking and feeling, whereas perception is made up of sensing and intuition, which I just spoke about. Thinking and feeling is basically what makes up judgment. So thinking is when one decides to think, they do it from a more detached standpoint, and they measure things more logically and consistently, as opposed to feeling. They do a lot of decision making by emphasizing the situation and looking at it from a more inside perspective and weighing the situation out. When someone does the test, it's basically done on the basis of the scores, and it leads them to 16 types. And if one appreciates and understands both their own style and their coworkers, their interpersonal relationship will be less frustrating and confusing because they know how to deal with the person and themselves. Tests like these are very good because they provide a shared framework and language. So basically when you get your results, you understand what they mean, and you understand how to deal with it. The next personality test I'm going to talk about is the Big Five model of personality. It basically defines human personality at the highest level. It interprets personality in 5 different dimensions. The first one is extroversion. Extroversion is basically someone with energy, positive urgency, tendency to seek stimuli of company and others, enjoy social surroundings, and assertiveness, which is kind of connected to the next one, which is agreeableness. It's people who tend to be compassionate, but they also get along with others very well. So a person who is extroverted would get along very well with someone who is agreeable, because the agreeable person is very agreeable, they'd be open to getting along with others, and the extroversion would be very social, also able to get along with others. The third one is conscientiousness. It's a person who shows self-discipline. They aim for a lot of achievement, but they have difficulty in controlling their negative feelings. The next one is openness to experience. It's a person who is very creative. They have a lot of appreciation for art and emotion. They have a lot of unusual ideas, but they're also very curious, and they like to experience a lot of different things. The final one is neuroticism. It's basically a tendency to experience a lot of unpleasant emotions, things such as depression, anxiety, anger, or vulnerability. The importance of being divided into these 5 categories is when a manager will test its employees. For example, if someone came up as neurotic, the manager would know how to deal with this person, know that they had certain vulnerabilities. Next I'm going to talk about groups and teams and organizations, and basically the types of groups and how important they are. There are many different types of groups and organization. Groups can be in the forms of juries, advisory groups, task forces, committees, boards, project teams. There's many different ways. Basically, groups have both assets and liabilities. Groups can improve communication, and they can also increase acceptance of decisions. However, on the downside, a lot of groups may over-respond to social pressure, individual domination, or let personal agendas get in the way of their collective purposes and get in the way of their work. As modern organizations rely less on hierarchical coordination, groups have to become even more important in the forms that they create self-managing teams, quality circles, virtual groups, and they even create groups by technology. So groups are becoming increasingly more important in organizations, and people have to learn how to deal with them in ways that don't bring them down, whereas they don't have one leader dominating the rest, or they don't involve personal issues.